Hey there, welcome to saas.unbound podcast. I'm your host, I'm Nadeina, head of growth at SaaS Group. Here, look, we're buying wonderful SaaS businesses to take them to the next level. And here I chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business a success. And today with me is Julien, CEO and founder of Mergify, a SaaS company providing merge automation and CI/CD tools for software engineering teams. That meant very, very little to me, I have to be honest. But let's dig deeper. And welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to see you here. So, before we actually try to learn what you're doing, how you're doing it, let's start with you, your background, and how you got to do what you're doing.
Okay, that's a good introduction. So I'm Julian. So I'm a software engineer. That's why I actually started things. I love tinkering with computers since I was a kid. And I started this way and I felt into open source while I was pretty young. So I started to learn things on the internet in the early 2000s, actually being a system administrator more than a software engineer, so more tinkering servers and installing Linux distribution, all of that, and moved to software engineering, still in open source, so contributing a lot to open source, and ended up working at Red Hat for a while, which is one of the largest open source company in the US slash world now, and which where I met my co-founder Mehdi. We were working on the same open source project, and we were having some kind of issues with our CI/CD. I know it's a lot of letters, and we started to build a tool for ourselves to solve our own issue. Basically, it turned out a lot of our colleagues were curious about what we were doing, what we were building, all of that. So we started to share what we were trying to build and how we were solving our issues, and they started to use what became Mergify. And I basically told maybe there are people out there, in the private company world that would be happy to have this software as a service and pay for it. So let's give it a try. And fast forward 5 years later, here we are.
Yeah, that's great. So you were solving your own problem. I guess that was kind of the inspiration behind Mergify. But when I talk to developers and sometimes tech founders as well, the narrative of the early days is the same. So like we built a bunch of tools. None of them saw the light of the world because, well, we either didn't know if anybody else wanted them or didn't really know where to find customers or weren't sure that somebody would pay for it. So a lot of it kind of, just ended up in the bin. So I'm always wondering, what is the journey where you decide, okay, well, this one I will try and take somewhere.
Right, that's a good point. I think when you start a project, there are two paths. Either you are one of your own user, which is great, and I don't think in my case I would be able to build something that I don't use every day. So like we've been using Mergify every day for the last 5 years. We still like use it to merge our own code every day, so the team knows it, all of that. Which is why I always been working in an area where I work on developer software, which is like I'm doing stuff I do understand, so I can also be the product owner basically. So either you do that or you look for a market where you try to find problem in market you might not really know, which is always problematic because you don't have any edge basically on other people that might be in that problem area and knows pretty well. So, but there are great stories about that. People trying to find a problem somewhere in a field maybe they don't really know about, and they find a problem and they just work on it a lot and they solve it and it works. But I think it's pretty hard to do that. Or you try to solve problem you know about, which is what we did. And the reason I think we pushed forward is first, we know very well what we are doing. So we are very tech savvy for sure, but we are experts on this field and we're becoming more and more expert as we progress and work on this kind of problem zone. So that's one of the things, there is a market for it because you talk to a lot of people and you saw, I mean, the first user we had were our colleagues, and so we knew they were having the same issue. So there's a thread to pull basically to see if there's a only your team like neighborhood or there's people out there also. And so you pull that thread and you see there are actually people. So the first thing I did is that I didn't want to for us to fall into the trap where we are both engineers. The fun for us is not to talk to people and sell the product, is to build it and add more features. So the pattern I see, and I still talk to a lot of co-founders and which are techs, and they're like, just build this feature, work well. I have one user, and now I want more users. I will add more features, which is not the way it works, right? But it's a fun. I mean, for engineers in general, just working on your code. And I knew that was a trap, so I decided not to go into that direction. So we soon split our role as being one guy doing the fun stuff, like working on the product and building features, and me going to look for users outside of our comfort zone, being like our colleagues and our team. So I went on the internet. I think the first forum where I went was the Indie Hacker forum, and I was like, guys, I'm doing this. Anyone using GitHub and wanting to use an automation service to rebase your pull request, whatever. And somebody said, no, I'll give it a try. And we got $2 from a guy, and we're like, yeah, there's a market for it.
That's your validation, right? Okay. Well, before before we get to putting the price tag on it, also I feel like, because I come from a background where I was working for a tech company for a local platform, and we were trying to take it to market, and I'm, as probably you understood already, I'm not a technical person whatsoever. And at the very, very early stage, it was kind of interesting still, trying to figure it out, kind of talk about the values and write up the articles and kind of compare what we were building to something else. But when it came to talking to people and actually communicating what we're building, one of the biggest arguments was that, oh, everything works already, or like I can build it over the weekend. And like, okay, let's get into features. Like, what are the buttons that you have? So I feel like the big challenge selling to developers is, first, to convince them that they cannot build it overnight, and second, to have this balance of like, yes, showing the value, but also kind of give them the feeling that, yes, there are more features that you want and more buttons that you can press, so more fun, as you say. So what's your experience with like selling to developers? What was the moment where they were like, ah, okay, well, maybe that's what I would pay for?
Yeah. So it is terrible to sell to developers because it's like selling a home to somebody that knows how to build it. So they're like, yeah, the first years where we were trying to pitch or demo. So first, I mean, before even that, if you want to reach out to developer, and to this day, it's still a problem. I hang out on a bunch of communities of people trying to market to developers, and it's very hard to do because it's a persona that does not like marketing and bullshit. I'm not saying marketing is bullshit, but you know what I mean. It's like they're really break down to hear to anything. I have actually a good anecdote on that. So I run a podcast about CI/CD in French. So if you don't speak French, you will not listen to it yet. But what I do is that I go to engineers and I like, you do you know, or are you the one running the CI/CD in your company? And if so, I want to talk to you and have you as a guest on one of the episodes. In a conference, so in real life, I went to a booth where I saw a bunch of engineers of a large French company, and I just, hey guys, I'm looking for someone who knows CI/CD to, and I did not finish my sentence, but one of the engineers was like, you want to sell us something, you want to sell something. Like, no, I just want somebody to join my podcast as a guest. So they're like that far in, like they see somebody approaching and not being, I want to talk about tech stuff, but I just, hey, I want to meet somebody that is, but like you want to sell something, which was not the case. So there are that in many cases very break down to marketing. So selling to developers is hard because first reaching out is very hard. Then when you add them on a call or something, it is hard because, and it was harder in the early days, what you show, like your value is still pretty simple when you start. And they're like, in their head, they're like, I know this works. I know to build this. And they always, I mean, you all know the story. If you work with engineers, you ask them for an estimate, like, oh, it's just 2 weeks. And then it takes 2 months because they forgot about XYZ. So they're in a sense, they're like, it's very simple. And what you do is just that. It's very simple. I could do that in a weekend. So I'm not going to buy your product. which is maybe true at the early stage. So you have to add more features sometimes. What worked in our case is after a couple of years, we had so many features, and I was able to also build a discourse in some way where I was able to pinpoint all the edge cases that we'll have to handle basically. So you think it's simple. Did you think about this failure scenario? Did you think about this case? Did you think this? And I know I'm an engineer, so I know all the burden it is to manage all of that edge cases and the problem that arise when, I mean, in the perfect scenario, yeah, sure, it's easy to do. But we also handle all the failure scenario that you will see in the next year or a couple of years that we will build the thing. And we've been doing that for like 5 years now. So if you want to do that, it's going to be very long and painful for you, and you will have to rebuild all the experience that we had over the last years. Do you really want to do that, or just spend a bunch of bucks on that and buy our product? And when you have this kind of speech with engineers, it starts to resonate like, okay, actually, you're right. I mean, I do understand what you're doing, which is great. You're doing a good stuff. I could do it, but you're right. It's going to be very complicated for me to do that. So I'm just going to, they're coming with what we call the build or buy it. So they're like, do we need to build it or are we going to buy it? And you have to ditch out the build in their mind, like being, okay, we can build it. And you can't say like, no, you will not be able to build it because I mean they will not take that correctly. They'll be, oh, are you insulting me? Like I'm an engineer, I can build it. So yeah, sure, you can build it, but it's going to be so long to build it, and it will be so subpar compared to what we've been doing that it's probably a bad idea compared to like the price we're asking for it. And usually after like 10 minutes, 15 minutes of demo, in my case, I know they switch their mind. Like, okay, actually, no, it's not worth spending 2 years with a team of 10 engineers building that. I mean, just let's just buy it.
Right. So it really helps to be an engineer when you're selling to engineers, you know where to wow them.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, what were you said the first kind of steps researching about the market were through indie hackers? What did you do next? Like from that first couple of bucks, from that first customer, where did you go next? And at what point did you realize that, okay, this is going to be the price tag for this thing and we're going to start charging more people?
It's a good point. So I think we had no clue when we started already to do marketing. So I did a bit of marketing myself. I in the past because I self-published a couple of books which I sold online on my own. So I had a community of people following me around the Python programming language, all of that. So that gave me an edge. Like I basically have a good network in the open source community. So I was able to reach out to people like saying, so probably good advice to have a community on your own, even if it's not like the CI/CD topic. In our case, it was more like Python, which is still tech, but not directly the same one. But I was able to move a bit of my community to like, hey, here's something I'm doing, so maybe you want to take a look. And then word of mouth basically works pretty well for engineers in terms of marketing. Very hard to do, and you can't really do anything about that. The only thing you can do is have a good product, make sure it works. Like, don't bullshit them, and it works. Like, still, most of our customer we have right now, they're coming by word of mouth. Basically, people are talking about, hey, we use that in our company. It works pretty well. You should give it a try because I know you have this kind of problem in your company too. So it's basically the best way. Then you can do a bunch of things, and we tried everything in terms of marketing. I discovered all the channels you could use, from buying ads to sponsoring newsletters, whatever. We tried a bit of everything. Something worked pretty well, some not at all, and most of them were not that great in our case. So we kept to doing basic things like SEO and word of mouth, which is pushing to our customers, like trying to push them to talk about that about them. Doing tech conferences, for example, in our case works pretty well. Like not necessarily talking about Mergify itself, but talking about what we do, like sending our engineers in conferences, say, oh, this is the thing we do. For example, about like, oh, we handle databases, I don't know, whatever interesting tech we could share because we build things internally. So it's the only problem is that it's mostly things that don't scale, and it's pretty hard to find things. The dream is like I'm just going to put $1,000 in a thing and it's going to bring me $2,000, but it's pretty hard to do in practice in general, and especially for developers because you're doing B2B, you're not doing B2C. You with a persona that is not responding to any ads. Actually, they have all ad blockers, so it's even hard to track anything about them. So you really like you just can count off having good products, word of mouth, things like it takes a lot of time and you can't really scale it. So I think in that sense it's a bit complicated. Yeah.
Right. But things that don't scale, they work really well. Even the
Yeah.
only thing is, I think, the time and just the resources that you have to allocate. But that was actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask you because, found your blog, beautiful blog, by the way. I'm going to link it in the description of the podcast. Then you said already that you had a book, and I know that you sponsored a couple of conferences, and there were meetups in Toulouse. And then, so basically, like you said, it's a community, and I agree with you. Here on the podcast, I had a bunch of people from Ruby on Rails community. Sometimes I joke that, to succeed in tech, you just build something on Ruby on Rails and tell the community, and there you go. All of them are ready to buy your product because I don't know, it's just so supportive. So it kind of worked in your case as well. So I wanted to ask, maybe there would be something that you'd recommend to tech founders, first steps to take if you are looking for an audience, which communities to tap into, like what you've tried everything under the sun, what doesn't work for developers.
I think what's sure is that what doesn't work is like whatever is too marketing. So you can do some kind of brand awareness in general, but you have to be very subtle about it. And so my advice is to bring value. And the best way to do that is to spread knowledge. Basically, we spend the last years educating people about whatever we've been doing, either on the product itself or, like I was saying, sending people to conferences talking about what we do. Like we don't even ask them to put a Mergify logo on the slides. Like you have that guy, you did some amazing stuff in tech internally at Mergify, just go talk about this. And people will ask you about, well, where do you do that? Okay, at Mergify, what is it? And that's it. So it does not scale. I mean, you're just reaching people one by one, but that plus the word of mouth effect after a few years. And the thing is that you have to think long term, basically, which is pretty hard nowadays. Like everyone wants to, just have a bunch of stories on TikTok just having 1 million views, and that doesn't work that way. So you have to do that step by like I remember starting doing SEO a few years ago with one of our marketing guy. It was like, doesn't work. We've been doing that for 1 month. It doesn't work. Like just 1 month. We'll wait for 1 year, and we'll talk about that. And after 1 year, the curve, like the graph, was all high. Was like, just take 1 year to do proper SEO and to write a bunch of articles every week and publish about a subject. So if you do that, if you basically bring value and bring knowledge to the table, people, especially engineers, like they like to learn new stuff, most of them. So if you go to a conference, you talk about something you wrote, you write blog post about whatever tech you're doing. Like I write every week, I try to write a blog post about whatever I'm doing, which is not necessarily very tech in my sense because I'm still an engineer, but I also a CEO, so I do less tech stuff. I do follow what the team does, but I don't write code every day anymore. But I can talk about pricing of SaaS. I can talk about whatever it is. Part of my other communities like SaaS founders, so they're maybe not going to be customers right away, but they'll talk to their CTO at some point or whatever. So you still do that, and people talk about you, what you're doing, if you share that. And that's one of the advice I always give to tech founders, which are focused on like building more features. Like just don't do that. Just do marketing, which is as simple as talking about what you're doing, not necessarily about your product, but what you're doing every day. What are your problems? Like every week, I'll try to think about what did I solve this week in terms of, I don't know, hiring new people, SaaS pricing, whatever. And I just, okay, I'm going to write about that and share a bit of my learning experience to the internet. And sometimes it works. People are like, oh, that's fantastic. I learned something. Thank you. And you do that every week or so as in a different media. Like this week, I was in a meetup in Toulouse talking about databases migration and we handled that Mergify, and that's it. I just talked about databases, and a bunch of people were like, "Oh, what do you do? It's interesting." I reached out to a few more people, so it doesn't scale, and it's like marketing for tech engineer can be as simple as that, basically. And from that, if you speak about a subject, a topic regularly, you become that guy about that topic, which is a good way to build a community. The way I, for example, self-published and sold like a few tens of thousands of books is like I kept writing about Python. I've been using Python, the programming language, for 15 years, and I wrote for years about Python, or do this, or do that, what the problem is, etc. And I built a community of people around Python that knows that I do this and this in Python, and I know about that, and I published a bunch of libraries about that. And you build a community like that, and people that knows you and what you're doing, and you can do that with a problem if you know that, for example, for Mergify, like CI/CD is a problem. There are this, and this is what we're trying to solve. So if you're into that, just follow us, etc. And you build this community from that, from the problem you're trying to solve, and the value that you bring on the table.
Absolutely. It's definitely not about quick wins. But, I was listening to another podcast that you did. I think it was scaling dev tools. And you said there, and I think it's a very common narrative, but sometimes it's a bit difficult to understand, like, what do you actually mean by that? And so you said, fall in love with the problem, not with the solution, right? So it sounds like an amazing idea, but what do you actually mean by that? Like, tell me why you're in love with the problem that you're solving and how it actually translates into what you're doing.
Yeah, I think what I mean by that is that the problem usually for tech founders again is that they have this tech and they want to use it somewhere, and they're trying to find the problem with that tech. For example, I had a conversation a couple of months ago with two engineers that were trying to start a company, like a startup. They're trying to solve planning of trips with tech. So I was like, why do you want to do this? Like, we have this fantastic tech, and we're trying to fit it into some problem that we found, and the only problem we found is that one. But I was like, what is your background? Are you in the travel industry already? Do you have an edge? Did you work at, I don't know, hotel.com or booking or whatever? No, we know nothing. We're just software engineers. We have a tech trying to find a problem, but you don't have any community. You don't have any edge. Like, nobody's going to invest on you because, like, you try to raise funds to build this company. Like, you have a tech which is, I mean, seems to me as an engineer okay, but like nothing fantastic. And then you're trying to find the problem. So, and I think Steve Jobs did that also, like, which is work backward to what the problem is and then use the tech to solve it. And a lot of engineers fall in love with the tech, which is like, for example, I love AI right now, LLM or whatever, and I want to solve a problem with that. So I have this solution, and then I want to solve, which I do understand as an engineer. I mean, it's a lot of fun to work with a new tech and to try to, oh, what could I solve with that? But as an entrepreneur, so that doesn't work. You have to fall in love with the problem, which is, if the problem is like, how do you do this more efficiently, then you try to solve that. And maybe the solution to that is not actually very tech at first. Maybe it's just hiring a bunch of people to do this manually and see if it works, and then bringing tech onto that to say, okay, with tech I can do something which is faster, cheaper, all of that. But you have to think this way and do things also to solve the problem that you want to, maybe that does not scale, that are not very techy at the beginning and they're just like boring. But this is the way to approach it and keep in your background in your head that you have this powerful tool which is tech, which can solve this probably more efficiently. But if you work backward, it's not going to work. You're going to have a very hard time trying to solve, which is actually what happened to us. Like, we started with the tech, and we then worked backward to, okay, actually we're solving a problem, and then we had to switch over the year. Like, what is the problem? But in a very large thing, like the first year of Mergify was not about CI/CD. It was about like automating stuff on GitHub, because that was the way we were using our own product. And then we talked to more and more people and discovered that there was a pattern of people using it into the CI/CD context, and most of our people actually buying the product were CI/CD engineers, which is a generic term for a lot of different titles. But we discovered that actually the problem is that, and we expanded our problem to be, okay, CI/CD is a problem. There are a bunch of other issues, and we're going to build more product inside Mergify to solve all these kind of different issues. And whatever we're going to build, which tech we're going to use, we don't know yet. We'll just look at whatever is the best to do that. But we know what the problem is now because we talked to a bunch of people. We have this community of existing customers and people around that want us to solve it at this point. So let's do this, and whatever it costs. In our case, we are software engineers, so the solution, it will be tech. Like, if my problem was like, I want to, wash I don't know, glasses or whatever in stores, it's going to be different than not very tech probably comes as a solution, but you have really to think that way and not the other way around.
Right, absolutely. So now you're also investing into dev tools, and I'm curious how, this mindset works when you're investing. So like when you're looking for tools to invest in, is it actually the tool, the product, the team, or the problem that you're trying to fall in love with and evaluate whether or not you want to invest?
It's a good question. It's mostly the team. From my past experience, it's mostly the team that is really the center of everything. Not saying that the problems that tech are not important, but the truth is that when you start a new venture, you have really no clue what you're going to do in the next couple of years. Like I know that from experience and from talking to a bunch of people. So if you back people that are very in love with their tech and are trying to find a problem like not the good way, and they are not ready to pivot, for example, say, okay, this is actually not what we're going to do. I saw a bunch of founders over the last year doing that, which is really great. Like doing something, having a good tech problem, but realizing that it's not a good fit and you switch to something else. So that's where the team is fundamental to me. You have to have this mindset. What I also look for is what I call unfair advantage. Like for example, if you want to start a company in the travel world, like do you have an edge? Like do you know something about that, or just somebody buying plane tickets randomly from time to time? Because that's not really an edge. So do you have something like inside knowledge of the field you're going to attack, something like that, which really is like, for example, in our case, if I were to invest in Mergify, it's totally unfair for us because we know open source for like 25 years. We know a bunch of people there. We are engineers ourselves. We know CI/CD development workflow by heart. I mean, I've been using Git for 20 years now. I mean, since not 20 years because I think it's only like 18 years old or 19 years old. So, but like the first year Git came out, I was still already using it. So like I know all of that. I wrote patches on Git say 10 years ago or so. So yeah, I mean it's unfair. Like, if you want to compete with me, it's going to be very hard for you. Not impossible, but very hard. So you have to be very tech, unlike me. So it's an unfair advantage. So I look for that in founders, like do you really know what you're going to do, and do you have something that if I want to compete with you, it's going to be very hard for me to compete compared to you. So and if you have that and a good mentality where you're ready to not do anything but change your opinion about maybe it's not the good market, maybe it's not the good problem, maybe it's not the good tech, then you should succeed, because the point to succeed in an venture like that is to never give up, and basically to be ready to switch to anything that just comes to you, recognize opportunity, and basically wake up every morning say, okay, I'm just going to try again or try something different. If it doesn't work, all of that, the only people that don't succeed in that area, I mean, is really people that just give up at some point.
Yeah, that's a good point. But you're also competing, I guess, with GitHub itself. I mean, last year they introduced their own merge queue features. And what did you guys do? How do you stay relevant when, the trend is, hey, we want everything in one place because we don't want to switch from tool to tool. And also, the big guys, the big companies can introduce the features that all the vertical SaaS are building can be basically erased. I don't want to say erased, but still, like when the big company builds in your niche, I feel like yes, there can be still gaps because it's not their complete focus. So you're still winning by having this advantage of like really knowing the niche. But in your case, how did you react to this change and how did you adapt to it?
That's a very good question. I think it's a general problem in tech. It's a race. There's always someone trying to catch you, especially large companies which can just kill you. How many companies have been killed over the last couple of years by OpenAI when they say, oh, ChatGPT is going to do this, and you have a bunch of companies that are just dead. Or to do something else. In our case, GitHub is one of our largest competitors now on the merge queue market. We knew that for a while, so we were able to prepare. We actually knew they were working on that before they announced it. We were able to also talk a bit with them before the launch. we were a bit on the fence. So the merge queue market is a niche, as you said. So it's pretty small because it's like most of our users are staff engineers, people who have 20 years of experience. They know what they're doing. They know really well the problem we solve, and they know they need a merge queue. It's the best system to solve this kind of issues. So it's a like small market. You have to have companies that are not too big. We're not going to have Google as a customer. They're way too big because they have their own system internally. And if companies are too small, they don't really need a merge queue. So the fact that GitHub did that was great for us because a lot of people don't know what a merge queue is, and we still spend time educating the market. And we were in what is called a red sea market where there's nobody, you alone trying to sell something that there's not a Gartner quadrant for merge queues basically. So you're offering something that nobody knows about. So I think GitHub launching that feature was great for us because we thought they were going to educate the market, saying, okay, we did that, and now we can use that. And there's still a bunch of people. I mean, I do follow that on X or any social network, saying, "Oh, I just discovered what a merge queue is thanks to GitHub, and it's great. I'm going to use it." So the bad point is they're going to use it, and they're going to use the GitHub merge queues, which is bad for us. So that's the good side. Like people knows more about merge queue in general. Like engineers, they get educated about that. They know the system a little bit. So that's pretty cool because no, we're not weird. Like, okay, you do that. I know what it is. The downside is that usually, like you said, they're going to use GitHub on native merge queue. The good thing for us is that it's not something GitHub really invest into. Like that's the downside of basically having one company trying to do everything, even when they are large. They do it, but they do 80% of the work. So if you have a pretty simple need, you can use GitHub Merge Queue. I do have people coming to us and they explain to me what they want, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure we're going to use GitHub or your own Merge Queue." And like I say clearly, like from what you want to do, basically, you don't really need Mergify. Like the base of GitHub is going to work pretty well for you. You're a small team, you have a pretty large needs, all of that. So might be good enough. Give it a try because I mean it's fair. And so that's a problem. But because the niche is extending, it's not a large issue. Like there are more people using merge queues, and GitHub gets a part of this basically. But it's people we would have probably not have without GitHub because they would not know about merge queues. So it does not really affect us in that sense, and it's just more people knowing about merge queue. Then there are large companies, large teams which have really specific needs and want specific features that GitHub does not offer, and we are there from that. That's the current thing, and the future things that we're adding more features into the merge queue. We're adding more product connected to the merge queue also on Mergify, which is going to enhance the whole experience of having a merge queue, all of that. We are doing things again that nobody did before. We were the first company launching a commercial merge queue on the market. There were open source projects doing that before. And we're still adding more features. That's one of the actually I don't advise to do that, but we can't, me and Mehdi, we really don't know how to do otherwise, but we keep building things that nobody built before and inventing new markets for new products, which is terrible. Don't do that because it's very hard to sell things people never heard about. If you sell like a calendar software, everybody knows what it is. So it's easy to say, okay, how do you compare to XYZ? And maybe you're cheaper, maybe you have more features, maybe you when you sell a merge queue and nobody heard of that before, you're like, okay, I need to explain what it is. And when you need to explain what your product does and what the problem it solves, it's really hard to sell anything. Like, oh, I never thought about that problem. So let me think about the problem to really have this problem, and then maybe I will get back to you, and it's lost. So it's hard. So we have still this kind of defect to try to build things that don't exist. So we're still doing that for the merge queue and other products. We're also working on products that have a market where there is competitors because it's easier to sell. So we are a bit trying. Maybe we get older. I don't know. We're trying to sell things in a more easy way in the future.
What's the kind of the most exciting product that you've built that you still need to like validate if people would ever have this problem to solve?
First, I'm not going to talk about that because it's a secret. But
Okay.
yeah, there's a bunch. We have a bunch of ideas, and yeah, definitely that's it. We need to validate. So, for example, we had one idea I can definitely talk about, which is a couple of years ago. There was this crash in the market. We had a bunch of customers which were startup which just sunk. So we lost customers because of that. They were out of money. And a lot of our customers were like, well, we don't have, like, we are firing people, we have less money, so we need to spend less money on Mergify. So do you do that? All of that, which gave the idea of trying to optimize CI/CD cost. So we started to build a product based on that. We started to build the product, and at the same time, I started to reach out to customers saying, "We're going to build a product that's going to give you how much money you spend on your CI/CD, and try to optimize that." As we started to build the product, I kept talking to customers, all of that, and we realized nobody wanted that basically. It was a good idea, and even for us, we were like, oh, it would be a good idea for us to know where we spend our money on CI/CD, and like in which job exactly of our CI/CD, in which project we spend the most money, which engineer is taking the most job, like which one we should fire because they cost too many money. Seemed like a very good idea, and then we talking to customer, like it's not our problem. Like you talk to engineer, which were our core person, are like not really our problem. We don't really care. And we ended up talking to FinOps team, which are like, yeah, it would be interesting, but we want this feature to buy it. It was like it's like 3 years of development in a channel, and at the end, maybe we'll be able to sell to FinOps team, which is not our ICP. So let's not do that. So we didn't do that. We just throw everything in the garbage. So yeah, but so sometimes you do that. It's fun, but you need to validate them before really building them. So I also have a bunch of those related to like CI/CD of developer tools. But yeah, we'll see.
All right. Yeah, excited to see what you're launching next. So, just a couple more questions. The usuals here on the podcast. So, over 5 years of building Mergify, what do you think has been the biggest win and the biggest failure? And it can be for you personally as a founder or for the business.
Oh, the biggest win. I mean, personally, I learned so many things. I'm not sure it's a win, but I learned so many things on different topics. I think I mean, I grew basically of all the things I learned, not in a tech way, but, from hiring and managing people, talking to customers. I learned how to sell things, to marketing, to do all of that, which I thought at the beginning as an engineer were going to be a nightmare. I mean, it was going out of my comfort zone for a while, and now it's more in my comfort zone. So I keep pushing to see where I can actually try to find hard things to solve, which is what I love to do at the end of the day. I think trying to solve hard puzzle with tech most of the time, but sometimes with not tech and just talking to people. So I think it's for me, like I see that as a journey, which is not over, and I keep learning stuff. And as that, it's really great. I always love to learn new things in general, and even if at first, like I mean, doing demos and trying to talk with customers about contracts and negotiating is very discomforting, or like, no, I don't want to do that. And then you like, yeah, actually it's great. It's like a sport, like I'm trying to get better at that. So I did not think when I studied Mergify that it was something I would love to do, which I mean, I do wake up every morning like, yeah, what I'm going to do today, what I'm going to solve as a problem, what's some new things going to end up on my desk. And in terms of biggest failure, I think I'm not sure it's a really failure, but the hardest thing we have to solve is people. It is very hard to hire, manage people in general. Not that they're because they're awful, just because it's hard to build a team basically of people, and that's something I did not realize working in teams in the past. I mean, in the companies, all of that. I never was a manager in any of my team in the past in any of my company, but just a individual contributor, which is great, very comfortable. You can stay home and just write code, fantastic. And then you have to switch to the other side, and you will realize a bunch of problem of managing people in general. It's hard. You have to solve new problems, all of that. And yeah, I think we had a bunch of failure based on that, basically, like any companies. I mean, but when you're not a HR person, it's not your first role. I think it's really even harder because you really have a bunch of human people. And when you're a tech founder, when you are used to computers, which really does what you tell them to do, it's more difficult with human, right? So
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I mean it's very different. Like it's organic, it's people, right? So it's a very
Mhm.
different skill set when you're used to, yeah, I stay at home and just work with computers and I talk to my teammates from time to time. It's easy, and now you have to make sure like actually people in your team will talk to each other. So you do that, like you never did that before. It's easy with computer networks, but so it's the kind of problem in a sense that is, I think it's hard. And yeah, I mean we definitely have a bunch of failure on that. We're getting better and better on this after the years. We train a lot, we learn a lot on that, me and Mehdi. We are at the point where we're happy with that now, but it takes a lot of time and trial and error, unfortunately, to do something that works.
Yeah, sure. And you guys are remote, right? So I think it's
Yeah.
even harder to bring people together to this, to something that you cannot like really like touch and feel, right? But you still have to create this sense of company, sense of culture and community. So yeah, I bet it's a great learning. But the last question is always about hack, right? So anything that worked magic for you, maybe still works magic for you, can be the smallest thing. Can be about building a team, mental health, building your brand, anything that worked.
Good point to follow up on what I was saying about people. I think what worked pretty well for us, like you said, we are a remote team, and it's very hard to find balance between having people at home all the time or in the office all the time. So we are spread all around France. What worked pretty well for us is to have this balance of we meet every quarter somewhere in France. So we rent a house near the beach or in a large city, if it's the winter or whatever. And we rent a large house villa for a week and we just go there for 1 week all together. And that works pretty well. And I realized that when I was working full remote Red Hat like 10 years ago, if you don't meet people maybe for sometime never, that happened to me to work with teammates I never met in real life, it's very hard to understand what they write. Most of the time you work, you write on Slack or whatever, and it's hard to grasp how people talk in real life, at least for me. And sometimes like, oh, they're hassle or just that's the way they talk. And when you met them in real life, they're actually very nice, and the way they talk and they write and they communicate is actually this. And so when I read what they're saying, I can actually put like sound in my head. Okay, this is not actually rude. They're just because they're like very direct in the way they talk, and I know this because I met that in real life, and we drink beers together, and it's fun. We having good time, so I know it's not going to be weird. And it's also to do that. I mean, we can do Zoom calls or whatever, but it's hard to really grasp and to have meaningful conversation because usually it's just work because Zoom is not that fantastic to use, like I mean, video calls in general. So yeah, that's something we learn pretty soon, and that works pretty well, and that we keep doing is be very strict about that. Everybody has to come every quarter somewhere in France, and we just meet together. We spend time. We do work, talk work, but we do spend time doing other stuff like activities, all of that together, which is something you do in normal life when you go to an office, right? So something I do advise for people that want to do remote, which is very hard if you do remote with people that are all around the world. Luckily for us, we stuck to France, so that's easy to do, but definitely a good way to build a remote team.
Absolutely agree. Yes, we're looking forward to our own retreat soon in a couple of months. We're a little bit bigger, about 300 people, so it's harder to bring such a group
Yeah.
together. But I know what you mean. It's absolutely incredible when you know how people actually look and talk, and you meet them and they're like, "Oh my God, never knew you were so tall." So it's a great bonding exercise. Thanks for sharing it, and thanks for sharing this story. There is a bunch of learning from what you just told me, and it's super exciting to see what you're going to come up with next.
Thank you, Anna.
Sure, and take care.